Hey there, Taylor Elwood here, and I hope you're having a wonderful Saturday. Today I want to talk about what long-term magical workings look like, give you an update on the alchemical working, and talk about what you need to do to prep the kind of work that you want to do. I'm going to also just make sure, yes, phone is turned to silent mode. And, well, first of all, let's talk about that alchemical working. As you can see here, kind of sort of, here is the liquid, the wet way, and the dry way. There's some pills in here. The wet way, I did pop a pill into each of the vials. There's 10 of these total for different substances, and the one dissolved in each one. I just wrapped up the alchemical working earlier this week, and it was an 11-day cycle for the dry way, and then an 11-day cycle for the wet way. During this work, and I was doing this work from the Sphere of Art too. In fact, I have it over there. Let me show it to you real quick again. It's from this book. Yes. Anyway, for that working, one of the things I had to do is I had to abstain from alcohol. I don't drink that much anyway, but like I did no drinking during that entire period of time, and what was fascinating about the work is that it was again this thing of working with these basically the minerals in your body alchemically. So like I'm working with carbon in the case of the substance here, using a homeopathic substance to represent that. And then the wet way was again kind of the same, was a combination of water and vodka and a pill from that. And the purpose of that working was really threefold. I mean, I was doing it, one, to do it and to have the experience of doing it, and two, I wanted to see, or wanted to do it as a way to continue developing my work in this specific tradition that I'm taking part of in the Inner Temple of the Inner Temple of the Inner Convocation tradition. And so I wanted to deepen my work with that and deepen my work with the archangels. I'm working with them right now for my elemental balancing ritual, which is a month or a year-long working. Again, another long-term working. And the third reason, quite frankly, is just because it's actually, I'm still in the midst of the work. I'm actually in the next stage, which I'll talk a little bit about. So for this work, in this particular case, when I did the dry way working, I found that I had an experience that felt like gravity. Like I had this gravitational feel or this pull when it came to each of the elemental substances that I was working with. And so, I would do the sphere of art working, and which is a specific working where you're essentially creating a ritual space in which to work with the archangels and the elements. And then what I did is I connected with the dry substance and the alchemical, the elemental alchemical energy within myself as well. In this case, what represented like carbon or mercury or whatever else. And I would just meditate on it and connect with it. And what I felt was this, as I said, this gravitational effect, for lack of a better word. It felt like I was being pulled down into the earth more when I worked with it. When I worked with the wet way, it felt like what ended up happening is that the wet way essentially balanced that gravitational effect and created a feeling of homeostasis where everything was kind of balancing and coming to an equilibrium. So very fascinating stuff. Right now, I'm in the process of working with the holy fire, the four holy fires, which is kind of working with the taking the elevations and working with the energy of the involutionary and evolutionary energy, currents of energy that flow from the underworld to the cosmos and back again, as represented by the red and white dragon. If you don't know what all that means, don't stress yourself out about it. I mean, if you check out R.J. Stewart's books, you'll find some references to that stuff there. But in this particular case, I am working with that particular energy to kind of take this work further. And then after that, I'm going to be doing some work with the affinities, which I'll probably update you guys about. So what does all that mean? If I have you lost, it's okay. Stick with me here. We're going to get to where it all makes sense. So in this case, I'm engaged in a long-term magical working. And I find that, when people think about magic, a lot of times they think about spells, right? You do a spell for a result, or you do a magical working for a result. And a lot of those are quick, easy things. You do them quickly and they're done. It's done. It's just there. But a lot of magical work isn't quick. It isn't about getting a result right away or things along those lines. Sometimes it's a long-term, protracted experience. And it might be for a specific result. It may also just be for the experience. And I want to qualify that. Like, some people might say, well, why would I do magic for the experience? Why not do it for a result? And my answer to that is results are important. Results are a roadmap. They show you where you're going and where you've been. But when we only do magic for results, we do miss out on something essential, which allows us to understand and connect with the forces that we're working with. I would argue that when you're doing magic for experience, you're really doing it as a way to deepen your connection spiritually with what you're working with. You're doing it as a way to understand the world around you and understand yourself. You might still be doing it for a result, but you're also doing it as a way to change who you are. And realistically, anytime you're doing magic for results, you are still changing yourself. I've talked about that before. But I would say that when you're doing magic for the experience, it's one of those cases where you're allowing that experience to happen to you and transform you in ways that you may or may not anticipate. Is there some element of risk with that? Of course there is. But I think, when you do magic for results, you have a very specific idea in mind. You're like, okay, I want this idea or this possibility, and I want to manifest this, and this is going to change my life in this way, and you want to control it. and certainly a lot of magic can be used for that purpose. But I think that at a certain point, one of the challenges that any magician has to face is the realization that not all magic is about control. Not all magic is about a defined outcome that's easily understood, that sometimes magic is simply doing the work and seeing what happens and allowing it to transform you. And yes, dealing with the consequences of that transformation, good or bad. Not everyone is cut out for that, quite frankly. And that's okay. You don't have to be that way. But I would say that if you really want to go deep with magic, if you really want to understand how magic works and how it shapes your life and transform you, you have to be willing to have the experience and allow it to work through you. And I think that in today's modern world, and in the modern magical world, a lot of people who practice magic are uncomfortable with that because they want to be in control. And I've been that person occasionally. I'm not going to say otherwise. I mean, it's true. But my experience of a year and change ago, really kind of changed that for me, because at a certain point I realized, okay, I'm just doing magic for results now, and there was something missing. And it got to a point where what was missing was that deeper spiritual connection, and I realized it, and I realized that I needed to change course and get back to being me. And that part of being me was doing magical work, not just for a specific result, but to actually have the experience and let the experience speak through to me. So I still do results-based magic. In fact, I did some recently, which I'll eventually tell all of you about. Things are moving along smoothly. But sometimes you just have to do magic for the experience and allow it to transform you. And for me, that's actually been a huge part of my work. But it's interesting. Sometimes you think it's still there, and then you kind of get stuck and you realize it's not. And that was what was happening to me for the last, I would say that was what was happening to me from like 2015 to 2017. I got stuck, and I actually needed to get stuck. No coincidence that I was working with the element of stillness. Well, if you're going to be still, guess what? You're going to be stuck. I needed to be stuck. It was a huge buildup. Things happened, and massive change occurred as a result. And it's been overall really good. but it needed to occur in such a way that it was like a giant bap on the head from the universe saying, dude, you're going in the wrong direction. It's time to change course. And I've done that. And I'm much happier for it. So when we talk about and speaking of long-term workings, elemental balancing ritual is another example of a long-term working. Like in the case of the alchemical working, I had 2 cycles of 11 days. So that's 22 days right there. I have this work with the holy fires, which is going to occur for probably about a week or so, I'm going to guess. Maybe longer. I don't know. And then the affinities. So, I mean, this is going to be some protracted work over a period of time. But in the case of the elemental balancing ritual, this is work I've done where I've literally worked with a given element for every single day of the year for at least a year, and sometimes longer. There have been cases where I've worked with an element for longer than that. When it originally started out, I was only working with an element for like a year. But like in the last few examples, like when I worked with movement, I worked with it for 2 years. When I worked with stillness, I worked with it for 3 years. When I worked with stability, which came after stillness, I worked with it for only a year. I learned my lesson with stillness. And part of it was, it's like, I need to get to a place of stability and then go from there to what's next. In this case, creativity. Oh, and I am feeling so much more creative. Woohoo! But I'm also learning lessons about creativity. And this is what I mean when I talk about doing magic for experience versus doing it for results. I'm working with the element of creativity. I'm not doing it for a specific result. I'm doing it to basically work with creativity and come to a different relationship with it. And I'm allowing it to transform me and my understanding of creativity. Is that a little scary? Yeah. Is it needed? I think so. I think if your magical work doesn't scare you on occasion, if it doesn't challenge your understanding of reality and everything else, then you're doing it wrong. That's just my opinion, but there it is. And I think for a lot of people who practice magic nowadays, they kind of want to just stick with well, I'm doing magic for a result. I'm staying in the safe place, And so they see a little bit of the way the magic can work, but they avoid the scary parts. And hey, I get it. I mean, when your life gets transformed and changed in ways you don't expect, it is scary. But that's just part of living life anyway. I mean, I can point to plenty of people who don't practice magic who have experiences where their lives are turned upside down or whatever else. The difference is that with magic, at least, it's I would just say that I won't say it's necessarily benevolent or anything, but you get the experiences you need to have. And if you're smart and you know what you're doing, you learn from them and you move forward. And that's really, for me, what's happened. Now, when we get ready to do a long-term magical working, one of the things that we really want to think about is how to prep for it. Now, in the case of the elemental balancing ritual, for me, it's just really just when I work with a given element, I choose to work with it for a year, but I usually get advance warning as to what element I'm going to be working with next. It just starts to show up in my life. And so there's this gradual transition as well. Like the last month in particular, it's usually a combination of elements. So like with stability, for the last month, which was September to October, it was definitely, there was definitely a lot of stability work, but there was a lot of creativity work. I was taking back my books from my publisher, and it was pretty much an evident thing that needed to happen. And so that was, stability and creativity working hand in hand. And it'll be the same thing the next time around. With the alchemical working, there's definitely some preparation. One of the things I needed to do was get the substances. And the other thing that I needed to do is I needed to basically understand that there were certain changes I needed to make in my lifestyle. So for that, for basically 22 days, I needed to stop drinking. Actually, more than 22 days, because I took a little break in between, but I didn't want to drink in that time. So, almost a good solid month. I didn't have any alcohol, which again, I'm fine with that. It was good. It was actually a good opportunity for me to see what that felt like to not drink something alcoholic for, for a period of time. I go through periods where I don't drink, but when you go through a But when you're going and you're doing something very intentionally, it can be interesting to observe how you react to to something that you don't normally get to have, or something that you normally have that you're not getting to. And in my case, I found it interesting because I didn't really miss drinking. There were a couple times where I was like, yeah, I wouldn't mind having a drink with my sweetie, and enjoying it. But overall, I was just kind of like, I can live without this. It's not something essential to my life. So with a protracted working, you are in some cases making some changes, and you're also inviting change into your life. And I think that's the biggest part of the prep work, is that you have to be prepared to change, and at the same time know that you can anticipate it, but you can't control it. At a certain point, you're just going to do it, and that's all there is going to be to it. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up. I just kind of wanted to share some thoughts on that, give you an update on the alchemical work, and wish you a happy Saturday. So take care and have a great weekend.